All right, perfect. Okay, Ghost Stories from Vernon County by Veronica Kleiber. Thank you, Veronica, and you can begin as you'd like.
Okay, Ghost Stories 2020. This time of the year, more so than any other time, our thoughts turn to ghosts and spirits. We all enjoy ghost stories as long as we are safe at home. The stories I'm about to tell you are first-person accounts of unexplainable happenings that ordinary people experienced. These are true stories, and they will make you wonder how strong the boundary between the world of the living and the dead actually are. They include the tragic story of a beloved daughter who called to her father from her grave, a local healer who, while tending a sick child, sees the child's spirit leave through a window and she dies, a long departed great-grandmother who advocates for her deceased great-granddaughter, a loving father who seemingly helps his son fix a tractor from beyond the grave, a death angel that appears to a woman who has recently given birth, and a strange and mysterious happening at a local cemetery. So we'll start with the chilling case of Claire Olson. So if anyone wants to further
Veronica, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I accidentally muted you, so I'm going to ask you to pause for a second, and I am going to come and unmute you because I can't, unfortunately, do that as the host. So my apologies, everyone. Just one moment. Sorry.
So should I proceed, Lacey?
Yes, please. Again, my apologies, everyone. If I believe you were showing us the book, Veronica.
So if anybody's interested in further details of the story, this is a book that's right here in our library and you can check it out, and it has a complete story. I used only a tiny part of it as it was pertinent to the story. So this is the tragic story of Clara Olson and the young man whom she was dating. Clara ended up dead and the young man disappeared. Did he kill Clara because she is pregnant and he did not want to marry her? Did he have bigger plans that didn't include a farmer's daughter? We will never know exactly what happened that fateful night in September, but Clara Olson would come to haunt her father from her grave. Clara Olson was the pretty 22-year-old daughter of Kickapoo Valley farmer Chris Olson. She disappeared about midnight on September 9th, 1926. The Olson farm was about 7 miles from Rising Sun, and when an automobile turned into the driveway of the Olson farm that night, it was just assumed to be Ermin Olson because Clara had been dating Ermin for about a year. Ermin was the son of a wealthy tobacco farmer from Rising Sun. Before leaving, Clara called out to her father, "I am going out for a minute." That would be the last time that he ever heard from his daughter. Clara had bought new clothes shortly before she disappeared, and her father and other family members assumed she had eloped with her young man. but he began to have doubts. 2 days after his daughter's disappearance, Chris Olson sought out Erman to question him about his daughter. I told the boy that if there was anything wrong, to get married and come to my house. I told the boy I'll give him a piece of ground where he could grow tobacco and be happy, so everything would be all right. However, Erman declined the father's office and made plans to return to college in Galesville. After 10 weeks of hearing nothing from his daughter, Chris Olson feared the worst. He thought his daughter was dead. If she had been alive, she would have written to me no matter what was wrong. She was not afraid of me. She knew she didn't have to be afraid. Chris Olson began to have dreams about his daughter's death. He told neighbors, I've seen Clara. I've seen her in a dream. I know she is dead. I saw her buried on her face on a hill in rising sun. On September 25th, Erman's father, the young man's father, received a letter from his son confessing to his father, you will never see me again unless it's in my coffin. I'll take death rather than capture. At this point, first-degree murder charges were issued against Erman, who had disappeared. Erman's father pleaded for his son to come forward to face the murder charges. I know he's innocent. If only I could reach him, talk to him, I know he would come. On December 2nd, because now it's a murder charge, locals were out looking for Clara's body and they found a shallow grave along the ridge. On closer inspection, it turned out to be Clara's final resting place. Her head had been crushed by a blow. Clara was face down, buried on a hill near rising sun, just as her father had seen in his dreams. I know she is dead. I saw her buried on her face on a hill near rising sun. So the body was found on Battle Ridge, a mile from rising sun. And Erman was never found or heard from again. So the next story is from Lila C. And although it takes place in Minnesota, she remembers the experience to this day. She tells the story in her own words. It was a cold day near the end of November. I was 7 or 8, and my dad was driving the family up to Minnesota to see Aunt Irma and our cousins. There was a new baby, about 4 weeks old, and the baby was going to be baptized. And then there was to be a celebration. We were going to stay at Aunt Irma's house, which was out in the country near the town of Bratton, Minnesota. It was the morning of the baptism. My mom and I awoke, and after using the toilet in the basement, we headed back upstairs. Lois, one of my older girl cousins, 17, was filling the kerosene lamp as we were coming up the stairs. She set the lamp on the hot stove to fill it. She spilled some of the kerosene on the stovetop, which started on fire, caused the lamp to explode. Fire shot up to the top of the ceiling and quickly spread throughout the kitchen and the back bedroom where the baby was sleeping. The fire was so intense that nobody could get into the back bedroom to save the baby. Mom and Grandma's hair was singed from trying. We rushed out of the house into the snow and cold, and we stood and watched the house burn down. It was a total loss. The adults thought the baby had probably died from smoke inhalation. The neighbors came and took us to their house. And Lila said, because it was so far out in the country, by the time the fire trucks got there, the house was burnt down. Not long afterwards, the Salvation Army arrived with clothes and boots for us, and the next day we drove back to Viroqua. And the incident was hardly ever talked about. However, I remember waking up in fright many nights afterwards, thinking I saw my clothes hanging on a wire at the far end of my bedroom burning. When I was grown, I heard the rest of the story from my mother. My grandmother was profoundly affected by the fire and the loss of the baby. She was especially grieved that the baby had never been baptized. She could not sleep at night, bothered by reoccurring dreams of her mother, dressed all in black, appearing from behind the bedroom door. Grandma would step forward from behind the door and swish the skirts of her black taffeta dress back and forth again and again before disappearing back behind the door. Grandma wondered, what did her mother want of her? The idea began to grow in her head. Her grandmother, her mother, a devoutly religious woman, would not rest until the baby was given a proper Christian burial. Grandma's son John became convinced if his mother was to ever have any peace and quiet, then that was what had to happen. Together with others, he went back to the burned out house and searched for the infant's body. They found what they assumed were the charred bones and arranged a proper funeral for the little body. After the funeral, Grandma was never again bothered by her mother. This next story is about Tom and Jerry's tractor, A Visit from Beyond. Tom's father, Jerry, loved tractors. In fact, he had a goal in life to purchase his own tractor. One day, Jerry was able to make that dream a reality. Sadly, he was only able to enjoy the tractor for a couple years as he passed away from injuries sustained in a terrible accident. Tom is very much like his father and shared a similar dream of owning his own tractor. When his father passed away, Tom asked his mother numerous times, could he have the tractor? After years of asking, Tom's mother finally agreed the tractor would be his. It was a sunny winter day in Viroqua when Tom was outside working on his tractor. Even though it was winter, Tom had moved the tractor outside of the garage to work on it. Inside the house was Tom's wife, Trina. Tom had been outside for quite some time, so Trina looked out the large picture window in the living room to check on his status. Tom was still standing on the side of the tractor working on it, but he wasn't alone. Standing on the other side of the tractor was a man. The man was clearly leaning into the tractor and looked like he was engaged in a conversation with Tom. Trina looked up and down the driveway for a vehicle to try and determine who was there, who was working on the tractor with Tom, but there were no vehicles. It was so puzzling because Tom hadn't mentioned that anyone was coming over that day. Trina looked out the window again and continued to see Tom and the unknown man working on the tractor. She wasn't concerned about the man and continued on with her day. Later on, when Tom came in the house, Trina said, who is the man working on the tractor with you? And Tom said, the only person working on the tractor was me. Trina explained to Tom how she saw a man standing on the opposite side of the tractor working on the machine. It even appeared as though a conversation between Tom and the man was happening. It was very puzzling for Tom and Trina, but the more they talked about it, the more they came to the realization that the man may have been Tom's father, paying the tractor and his son a visit from the beyond. This next story is from Betty Kenworthy, and she was a resident at Maplewood, and she told this story to me. She said she grew up hearing this story from her father. When her son moved her to Maplewood, he found a recording of the story that one of his aunts had made. And he forwarded to the museum, who gave me access to it. So this occurred near Lafarge. So Dennis Wilson is her son. A few years ago, while moving my mother's household furnishings, I found a tape with the story recorded on it. These were the experiences of Glenn, my grandfather, and Opal, my grandmother. So Glenn and Opal were Betty's parents. So, and this is the recording. Opal, what I am about to tell you is a true story. It sounds like it couldn't be, but it is. It was August 10th, 1929. I was 18. It was a beautiful day, a warm day, and it was a very warm summer. We were expecting a little brother or sister to come anytime. I woke up that morning and my dad said I should go to the barn to milk the cows with my two sisters to assist me. We'd all go over and milk the cows and do the chores. When we were gone, my little brother was born. And he was, well, everything seemed fine. He was a nice baby, but I was kind of upset, so I didn't eat anything the whole day. It was Saturday, so I had a date with Glenn. He came down and I told him I hadn't eaten, so he said, I'm going to take you to Lafarge and get you something to eat. So we went to Lafarge and I got ham and eggs. We got something to eat and came down to the farm. We didn't have much else to do, so we sat in the car and talked. I think it was about 11. It was a foggy night. We started onto the house from which was a distance from the car. We were almost up to the door, but not quite. A little wash house was there. We stopped and turned around and faced each other. We were standing there and talking, just kind of wondering if we should go to the house. And Glenn says, do you see what I see? And I said, yes, but what is it? It couldn't be the fog. It didn't look like that. I looked down and it was floating along the ground about a foot off the ground, and it was just like a handkerchief or a flag floating in the breeze. We both saw it at the same time, and I just stood there. We didn't say anything because we were so scared. I heard something buzzing up by my head like a bee, but I heard, and I cannot tell what was by my head buzzing. I thought the buzzing sounded like a bee. So then I looked and I saw it clear off towards the bedroom window where my mother and the baby was. We didn't think about her at all. We thought it must be some kind of warning. We both went into the kitchen and sat down on chairs. I don't know how long. We talked and I said, I'm afraid to let you go home because I don't know what will happen to you on the way home. It must be one of us. I didn't want him to go. He said, laughing, your folks aren't going to want me to stay the night. And he finally got up the nerve to go home. I guess that's probably true. Wouldn't want to find the boyfriend there in the morning. I was scared. I went upstairs to go to bed and I had to go through the long room to get to my bed. At that time, my father was sleeping up there because a midwife had come to take care of my mother. So she was sleeping downstairs with mother. I went through to Dad's room. He awoke and I said, oh, Dad, an awful funny thing happened. And I told him, he said, that's a warning. Somebody's going to die in this family. As he didn't say anything further, I went to bed. But we talked about it as time went by, and Dad kept saying, someone is going to die in this family. I was pretty scared, but I guess we were pretty superstitious. A couple of days later, I was in my mother's room. I was cleaning up the room and straightening up things as the nurse had the little child in there and didn't keep things up very good. My mother said to me, sometimes when I'm well, I'm going to tell you something. I've got something to tell you. If I told you now, it would scare you to death because you wouldn't know what to think. I said, what do you have to tell me, Mom? We, Glenn and I, saw something too. We saw something that was sort of funny. So she just started to relate that as she lay on the bed, as she started to wake up after childbirth, she opened her eyes and there was a white thing that came in through the window. And she said to me, it came to me and slid over the bed. She just laid there and watched it. And pretty soon it came down, floated down, touched her on the chest. And as soon as it touched her, she said she was gone. She was going up, up, up into heaven. And she said, is this real? Am I going into heaven? She said she heard beautiful music and then she got almost there when she started to come to and she said she heard Brian, the new baby, cry. And she came to and she said to herself, well, I just can't go, Lord. He needs me. And as she said that, she came back. She turned back. She seemed to go from the light and she was all right. And I said, well, so that was what we saw. And Betty said her uncle Brian, her brother Brian grew up to be an old man, and her mother lived to a long life too. This story is my last story, and it's Mysterious Happenings at Bad Axe Cemetery. This story was told to me by Arlen Erickson about a mysterious experience he had and a friend when they're at the cemetery next to the Bad Axe Church in Purdy, in his words. Well, years ago, Purdy used to have a blacksmith shop and a general store. After chores at night, some of us would go down to the general store to hang out and play cards. My friend and I liked to play ping pong, and since there was a table in the church basement and the church was never locked at that time, we sometimes would go over there to play. Well, one night we walked out of the church and happened to look over at the cemetery. At that time, there were no lights up, so it was dark. It was a quiet night with no wind. What we saw really confounded us. What we saw was a big teardrop-shaped cloud, if you will, which glowed, not white like fog, but almost iridescent like a pearl. It was about 6 feet high and about 15 feet long and moved slowly through the middle of the cemetery. There was no wind that night, so it seemed to be moving on its own. We watched for a while, dumbfounded, and then at the same time, we said to each other, "Let's get out of here," and we left. What it was or who it was, I guess we will never know.
Well, that's so interesting, Veronica. All of these stories have such uniqueness to them, and it's really interesting that the stories are all first-person accounts coming
And
from people who live around here.
yeah, all local. I think that's really, really neat. So, but
Yes.
a lot of people have experiences they can't explain.
Mhm.
And if anyone listening has a ghost story and you'd like it included in this collection, we keep it in a file at the museum. Just contact me or the museum or Lacey and we'll write it up. So it doesn't have to be really exciting or fantastic. It's the way you react to an unusual, unexplainable experience.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, maybe now is the time that we want to open up the group for some more dialogue and to hear from some of the people that have been listening today. If anybody out there has a question for Veronica or a comment, or wants to let us know what one of their favorite stories was, or even if you have your own story and would like to share with us, now could be a good time to do that. Okay. Oh, I wonder. Let's see. Okay. Oh, Emmers commented that that was great and thank you. Well, thank you for joining us today, Emmers. And if people are wondering how to remove your mute, in the bottom left side of your screen is a microphone, and you can unclick that if you'd like to talk to the group. Meanwhile, I can let you know that if you do have your own personal ghost story, or if you've experienced something that's a bit unexplainable, you can certainly let me know here at the library and I can get that to Veronica, or you could contact the Vernon Museum, as Veronica mentioned, so that your story could potentially be put into a collection of stories that could make a book for the area.
I missed a story. If
Oh,
anybody was,
one
if
more.
anybody was waiting about the story about Anna Proctor, I'll just go over it briefly. So this is June Progretti's account in her own words. Her grandmother was a local hero, a local healer. Okay, so this is what June Progretti says. My Norwegian grandmother, Anna Proctor, told me this story and she never lied. She used to go from place to place helping people when someone was sick. She was called to a home outside of Viroqua where a 2 or 3 year old child was sick. Back then, they used to do anything they could to help make a child well. They'd rub kerosene on their chest, whatever they could do, they thought that would help. After a long period attending to the ill child, my grandmother and the child's mother went into the kitchen to sit down for a cup of coffee. The chimney of the kerosene lamp that was sitting on the table exploded, and a white form came out of the smoke. Then the foggy-like shape went to the window and disappeared. Right after it happened, they went back to the room where the girl was and found she had just died. So that's June Pedretti's account of her Norwegian grandma.
Oh, that one was tragic. Some of these stories today are just, very historical and
they're usually ghosts. The reason these stories are tragic, Lacey, is to get a ghost or a spirit, you have to be dead, don't you?
yeah, that could definitely be a part of that mystery.
But it is interesting that, like I had said, how thin is that barrier between the world of the living and the world of the dead? And certainly some people are much more sensitive to it than others.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and possibly at this time of the year too, maybe that connection is more available for some reason.
thinner, yeah, because of the time of the year. Because
Yeah,
Halloween.
this could definitely be. I mean, Halloween is right around the corner, right?
Yes.
All
And
Souls Day, Day of the Dead.
the Celts from Ireland and the British Columbia, the Celts. The Celt is just a Greek word for barbarian, but that's how they dealt with unknown situations. They had bonfires and they wore costumes, animal skins, and
Okay.
this was their celebration of the new year. The crops were all in, so yeah,
Right.
so it definitely has something to do with this time of the year.
Yeah, Halloween has some roots in that as well.
Veronica, this is Trina. I don't know if you can talk without a script, but I do remember hearing a ghost story from you that was about the Viroqua cemetery with the gentleman who liked to show off his deceased wife. And I thought that story was fascinating. I don't know if you can recount it from memory or not, but it gave me chills when I heard it from you before.
Oh, certainly. And I didn't include it because it's not really a ghost story. But
yes,
this man was so proud of his wife's beauty, apparently, that when she died, he built her, he put her coffin on a stand in the cemetery. And on Sunday, he would open it up and he would encourage everyone to come and view his wife. Really bizarre. But one day, I guess there was quite a crowd at the cemetery after church, and he scooped up a young boy to show him his deceased wife, and it kind of freaked out the kid's mother, and they petitioned to have the coffin removed, which the city did, and they buried it in the usual manner under the ground, and that was the end of his showing off his wife's dead body. So yeah, people do some strange things sometimes.
Whoa. Veronica, have you ever heard of any hauntings in the Main Street area of Viroqua or the fairgrounds or the courthouse area?
Well, I've looked, Lacey, because I wanted a ghost story, but what I read was I don't think Norwegians scare very easy. There are really, there's an absence of ghost stories in Viroqua, so. And no one has come forth to tell me any, so, but one of the books I was looking at said there just really isn't much in the way of ghost stories on Main Street. I know that a while back, one of the advertising magazines out of La Crosse had a story about Genoa, and apparently the hotel in Genoa was haunted, and who was haunting it was a steamboat had blown up in front of the Mississippi, in front of Genoa, and 122 people were killed, and so on and so forth. And that was written up And Carol at the museum had put a stick-it note on the story and said, this is not true, that surely it would be recorded if that many people had got killed. So sometimes people's imagination gets carried away from them. But I mean, it's easy to make up ghost stories, which is why I thought it was so important to have first-person accounts, because the people that these stories happen to really believe them. So, you know, and who are we to say they didn't happen? But yeah, you could make up all kinds of ghost stories if you wanted, I guess.
Around the campfire.
Yeah, I think maybe the Irish are more inclined to ghost stories than the Norwegians.
Interesting.
I think the Norwegians.
I thought there was a ghost story at a business in Liberty Pole. Wasn't it an old hotel?
Yes, there was a skeleton found.
Yes.
Again, no one ever claimed to have seen a ghost, but some young kids were playing in the hotel was deserted. The poor lady who built it, she built it for a stagecoach, and that's right when they were putting in the railroad. So she never did get much business at her hotel. So it sat empty, and the local kids would play. It was a big room upstairs, and they would gather and play cards and whatever. And as young men want to do, they were exploring one day, and they found a coffin hidden behind the wall, and they dug it out and dumped it out, and it was a body. And so they were scared and ran away, and a coroner came and determined it was a human, and so on. And they asked the woman about it, and she confessed that her son was practicing to be a doctor and had bought the skeleton and to memorize the parts. And so they said, well, no crime done, but she should get it buried. And that was the proper thing to do. So she agreed, okay, she would get it buried. And apparently she never did. She just put it back in the wall. And so then a couple of years passed, and if a different bunch of kids don't dig out the same skeleton and dump it out on the floor again. And then after that, it did disappear. But there were no stories about it haunting the hotel or anything. So,
Whoa, certainly creepy.
yeah, it's creepy.
And that was out by Liberty Pole, you say?
Yeah, that was the hotel in Liberty Pole, which is still there, Lacey, but it's, well, I think it just stands empty, but they used to have a machinery shop in the basement, I believe, or.
Okay. Huh, interesting. And was it the first story? There was a murder. A young woman had gone off with her fiance and was murdered, and that was out by the Liberty area as well.
The Clara Olson one? Yeah, but by Rising Sun.
Yes, by Rising Sun.
Yeah, and that's a really fascinating story because it affected both families. I'm sure relatives are still sensitive to it, but it's an interesting murder story because it's how a small town dealt with a murder and the deception and the bad feelings it creates for generations and generations. So I think Larry Schnickel did a nice job writing it up. So
yes,
be sure to check that out if you want to know.
Yes, we do have that book here at the library, and we've actually had the author in to talk about that book before. So if anybody is interested in that story, you can certainly put that on reserve or on hold for yourself. And I was looking through the collection here at the library, and we do have other books on these subjects. So if anybody is interested in learning more about the ghost recounting in this area or unusual and unexplained events, we do have some materials on that here at the library.
We do have another program. This is Trina again from the library. Coming up on Friday, October 16th, John Syme from Reedstown is going to be joining us through Zoom at 10:30 in the morning to talk about UFO sightings in Vernon County. And so John has stories dating back at least 30 years about local UFO sightings, and he also is very open, as Veronica is, to hearing your stories. So if you're interested in UFOs, if you know someone who's had a sighting or an encounter and would like to share their story, I would invite you to ask them to join us October 16th, 10:30 through Zoom, and you'll be able to see the invitation on the library Facebook page so you can log on. Should be very exciting. It fits in very nicely, I think, with Veronica's topic of ghosts, because it all is the unexplained, which during the month of October seems very fitting to do these types of programs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for mentioning that, Trina. We're definitely looking forward to John's UFO program as well. And to add to that, there will be a presentation on the Fortney Hotel, the past, present, and future for one of Viroqua's Main Street iconic buildings. This program does not yet have a date, but stay tuned for more information to come about that program as well. Great. Well, I guess we could put out any last call to ask Veronica any questions or any comments or any sharing of your own stories. I can see here, Veronica, that one of the people who joined us today, named Jen Swigum, said, "Thank you, Veronica, and that was very entertaining, and that it's always fun hearing about mysteries." And someone else named Kleiber, maybe this was Joe or a family member, said, "It was very interesting, and thank you." And of course, Emmer said, "That was great, and thank you as well." And Nathan said he really enjoyed it at Creamery Creek. So thank you, Veronica.
Could you ask Nathan, when are they gonna let people come in again, Lacey?
Oh, sure. I'm not sure if he has actually just hopped off. Oh, he said that he is not quite certain yet.
Yeah, because I'm looking forward to coming back, so.
Definitely. We're so happy to be able to host you today, Veronica. You had, we had about 30 people join us for the call today. So I'm happy to see that folks out there are starting to pick up on Zoom and that we're able to reach out to each other, at least in this way as well. And also want to let people know too that you were able to join by video today, most everybody. But if you have friends or family members that aren't, that don't have Facebook or aren't quite able to access the internet or Zoom, the library can always provide people with a telephone number to call. So your friends and family members can call from their home as well to listen. They won't be able to see us, of course, but they could always listen to a program. Great. LM Jane from Kleiber. Oh, I'm Jane. It was Jane Kleiber that joined today. She wanted to let you know that. So hi, Jane. Thanks for joining today. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. I guess that will wrap up the program for the day. Thank you again, Veronica, and we wish everybody to have a very nice day. Goodbye.